Hey, you guys, welcome back to Founders Corner. This is episode 2. I am your host, Trey Lansdell. I am super excited for today's episode because we are going to be getting into something that I think is really key for a lot of agents that are getting into the industry, especially within our company. And today's topic, what we're going to get really heavy into is how to win part-time. You see, a lot of companies in our industry, especially now more so than ever, and especially our company, we allow agents to start up on a part-time basis. Right? The industry has changed, right? The industry is now no longer about people having to quit their job and get licensed and come full-time into the financial services industry because it's an industry that most people have never been in before, right? It's an industry that they've never gone to school for, they've never worked in. In fact, the average Canadian and American, if you ask them about how money works or how their own finances work, they would look at you like a deer in the headlights, right? So to bring someone in who has no industry background and tell them they have to quit their job, leave behind their income and come in full-time into something they have no clue if they can do is a massive barrier to entry for a lot of people. And so what our company did and what you see a lot of companies now do as well is we allow agents to come in on a part-time basis, right? Keep your job, keep your income, get licensed with safety, work part-time with us, build a little bit extra income. And then on top of it, you have your job as well on the side so that you're able to pay your bills consistently. Right. And then over time, as someone starts to build a really nice war chest of savings, they start to pay down their debt. They start to make a really consistent income here that's either trailing their full-time career in terms of income or even outpacing it. Then we have a conversation with them about coming full-time and actually making the leap if that's something they want to do. But the thing I find a lot of people go through at the very beginning is the struggle of how to win part-time. And so I'm going to cover 5 important lessons, 5 key topics, if you will, about how to win part-time in the financial services business as a part-time agent. So here's the first point. Number one most important thing, above all else, is you have to run a super tight schedule, right? You have to run a super tight schedule. The reason I say that is because if people are going to come in and start up in our company on a part-time basis, they already have a lot of stuff going on in their life, right? I got stuff, you got stuff, we all got things going on, right? We all have things. And so it's safe to assume that when you bring on an agent part-time, their life doesn't just go on pause because they got a broker code with you and started up in licensing. That's not how it works. Most people, if you're sitting down with an average qualified market individual, they're probably a husband or wife. They probably got a few kids. They probably got a full-time career. Depending on the age of the kids, they either are up all night dealing with a crying baby, or if they get a little bit older, they're probably having to deal with the extracurriculars like sports or things of that nature, right? You know, the outside stuff that they make you do outside of school, or maybe just doing your kids' homework at night, right? So there's a lot of things that are happening on top of that. Not counting for the fact that above all the extracurricular stuff, you're going to have people that have things going on in their life. They got family issues, health issues. They've got things that are weighing them down and taking up time that you probably know nothing about or know very little about. So the most important thing that a new agent can get really dialed in on, especially you, if you're part-time listening right now and you're like, I want to get this thing off the ground. I want to leave my job. I want to get to a point where I'm making a consistent income. I want to turn this into a full career. The most important thing above anything at the very start is having a super tight schedule. You know, I remember when I first got started in the business, the guy who trained me, my mentor, he basically told me, if you show me your calendar, I'll show you your life. Show me your calendar, I'll show you your business. Show me your calendar, I'll show you your chances of success. And it's so true. And it's very true for people that are full-time in the business, but it's even more so true for people that are part-time. Because like I said, most people, they wake up every morning, they're getting their kids ready for school, then they're heading off to work. And then when they finally get home, it's probably 3, 4, 5 p.m., right? And now they have to make sure they get their kids. They got to make sure they make dinner. They might have an hour or 2 or maybe even 3 hours tops in the evening where they can actually dedicate to something part-time on the side for a business. And so what happens to many people is they come in and they don't run a tight schedule and they get completely overwhelmed. They get overwhelmed with the training aspect of being part-time, right? Because they're going through licensing. They got to be on field appointments. They're probably doing 2-3 trainings a week just through their teams. And then on top of it, they have all the other stuff I just mentioned. And so what happens is if they don't schedule things correctly and if they don't schedule it effectively, they start to burn themselves out. And when an agent starts to burn themselves out because they feel like they have too much going on and they're overwhelmed, guess what happens? They cut out the easiest thing in their life to cut out, which is the new business they just started. right? They're not going to cut out their job that pays their bills. They can't cut out their family. They can't cut out their kids, although some parents maybe wish they could, right, for a little bit, but they can't cut any of those things out. So they're going to cut out the thing that's draining them the most and is the most volatile aspect of their life because they haven't scheduled it correctly. So what's the way you can schedule it if you're part-time? Well, there's a few things that are non-negotiable. Obviously, there's the stuff you got to do in the morning, which is probably tending to your family, tending to your kids, getting them ready for school, doing all that stuff. Maybe you're single, you have no kids. You probably want to get up in the morning, go to the gym, take care of your health, right? Whatever it is you do in the morning, right? Have your morning to you, right? Then you probably got to head to work, right? So you go to work, you do that. Prioritize the thing that pays your bills, prioritize the thing that brings in the most income. Don't ever jeopardize that. And then after that, it then becomes a question of, well, what do I do with those hours after work? That hours from 5 to 9 p.m., what do I do in there? Well, maybe you got a little bit of family time in there if you have kids. Okay, maybe you spend an hour or two to be a dad or a mom, right? Outside of that, what do you then fill those other hours with? Assuming you got the kids taken care of, you tucked them off to bed, right? You got their lunches ready for the next day, you did all that stuff. What do you then do with those extra 1 to 2 hours? That's where you start to schedule time. And you know what? With that said, that doesn't mean that every Monday through Sunday needs to look like that, where you have field time in the evening every evening, right? Maybe Monday you get off work, you're a dad to your kids or a mom to your kids, you get everything all squared away. Maybe that's your field night. Maybe that's where the 1 to 2 hours you're booked with back-to-back appointments, right? And then maybe Tuesday's a bit of like some recreational leisure time, right? You're spending time to yourself, or you're spending time with your spouse so that you still maintain that relationship and it's not suffering because you're spending all your time working, right? Then maybe Wednesday is training night, which is what we do within our team, right? We got our Wednesday evenings blocked off for training. So maybe you don't run field appointments that night. And then maybe Thursday, again, same deal. You run field appointments on that night. Maybe Friday's a bit of a recovery day. And then Saturday, Sunday, the weekend is your oyster. The weekend's your oyster. Assuming you don't get hit with too many, unexpected tasks or things that you didn't plan for, you can hammer out a bunch of meetings on Saturdays and Sundays. You can hammer out a bunch of modules in your licensing on Saturdays and Sundays. You can go and do a bunch of things over a small 48-hour period of time that can move your business forward that you maybe weren't necessarily doing throughout the week. Because here's the number one thing that most people forget, especially when they're getting to something that involves an element of business or ownership or entrepreneurship. It isn't necessarily the amount of time you spend. It's not quantity of time. It's the quality of the time that's spent. And I've seen people come in, put in 4, 5, 6 hours a week and absolutely dominate people that put in 20, 30, 40 hours a week. And why is that? It's very simple. They just do more with their time than the people who have too much of it. And you could even argue that the people who have so much time and excess of time, they don't maybe necessarily value it as much. And so they kind of slack off throughout the day, right? Whereas the part-timer who only has a few hours to get work done, and he knows that if he's working, that's time away from his wife, time away from her husband, time away from their kids, time away from recreational, time away from leisure, that if they're working, they're making sacrifices to do that work. And so they take it more seriously. And so that's the importance of running a super tight schedule. The second thing with it is if you run a tight schedule, it removes all the guilt. You see, most people, they have guilt if they don't run a tight schedule, right? If they don't run a tight schedule and they're all over the place, when they're spending time with their family, they feel guilty that they're not building their business. When they're building their business, they feel guilty that they're not spending time with their family. And so the way to remove that guilt is you have everything outlined in your calendar. Everything goes in the calendar, and then you do everything in the calendar. Right? So when I'm with my family, I don't feel guilty that I'm not building my business in that moment, right? Because I did 10, 12 hours of meetings the day before. If I'm in the field, if I'm working with clients or if I'm training new agents or I'm running appointments, I don't feel guilty about it because guess what? I already spent some time with my family, right? And I know I have the next date night set or the next, movie night with my kids or whatever already booked in the calendar. And that removes all the guilt. You put everything in the calendar. You go exactly where you need to go. You do exactly what you need to do. And you're always present in everything that you are doing. And that removes all the stress and all the emotion from the equation. Takes all the stress away. And so that's the number one thing that I recommend when you're running a business part-time is you run a super tight schedule. So that's point number one. Point number two is have support in the home. This is the thing that I see a lot of people live and die on. It's like a sword they fall on, right? And what I mean by support in the home is I mean that your spouse or your partner or whoever is that meaningful connection to you, your partner in life, they understand what you're doing and they're supporting you. Now, where most people mess up is they think that means their spouse needs to be an agent, or they think that means their spouse needs to be an assistant or some kind of coordinator or have some kind of active role in the business. I think that's I just think that's a joke, to be honest with you. I don't think that you need that. But I do think that you need to have some kind of support, be it emotionally or tangibly, to actually get you off the ground. You see, what happens for a lot of people when they first get into the business, and it ties into not having a tight schedule, they're part-time, right? So they get up in the morning, they work their job, they come home, and instead of spending those 1-2 hours that night with their spouse, that quality time, they're working. And so now they're spending no time with their spouse. And if at the very beginning, when you're first getting it off the ground, you're trying to find clients, you're probably not licensed yet, so you're not even getting paid, you're trying to figure this thing out, it can create a lot of resentment if your spouse isn't on the same page with you. Because now you're away from your spouse, you're not making any money, you're not spending time with them. So they just look at it as, oh, my husband or my wife is doing this thing, right? They're not engaged in the family, they're not engaged in the home life, they're not dating me, they're not doing whatever, and he's not even paying the bills, right? So like, why am I entertaining this? And so that's the doomsday scenario. That's the scenario of disaster, because what then happens for that agent is every time they get off a meeting, their spouse asks them, well, how'd your thing go? Right? Every time they come back from training, oh, how is your thing? And it's like a little cut every time they get asked that. Oh, have you made any money yet? Oh, are we, right? It's just over and over and over and over again. You get where I'm going with this, right? And it's like 1 cut, 2 cut, 3 cut, 4 cut. And at the beginning, it's not a big deal, but it starts to add up. And then it becomes this death by 1,000 cuts where eventually you just bleed out from all the objections and all the negativity and all the criticism. And you probably feel like you're trying to run uphill with a piano tied to you because you don't have any support from your spouse. And especially if you got kids or things like that, which come with their own commitments, and it can make the schedule a lot harder to work with, and it makes hours even shorter. If you don't have support in that area, well, now the time with your kids is cutting into your ability to build a business. Instead of being able to run field meetings or training appointments or things like that in the evening, you might surrender your whole week because your spouse isn't willing to support you and help you out. And you have to tend to all the stuff in the home with the kids, right? So how do you get support in the home? Well, there's a few ways you can do it, but the easiest way to do it, and I'll just be straight up with you, is you can buy it with cash, right? I think the number one thing that people don't like hearing, but it's the reality, is if you want support, you have to earn it. Support is earned, right? And you know what? Don't feel too upset and don't take it too personally if at the very beginning your spouse doesn't support you. If you're lucky enough, they will. If you got a really tight bond with your spouse, they'll support you. But most of the time in this business and in our industry and with our company, spouses don't start supporting you until you start putting some money in the bank account. And how can you blame them? How can you blame them? Right? Because if you're spending time away from them and you're 6 months in and you haven't made any money, then I'd argue there's probably not much there for them to support. Right? So it's an obligation on you. You have to start showing up with results. You have to understand that if you're away from your family, and you're putting time towards a business that, yes, ultimately is for the both of you. It's for the family. It's to benefit everybody, but it's you doing it. If you're putting in that time, there needs to be a return on investment. There needs to be an example set that you are actually delivering on that time spent and that it's not just wasted hours. And so you have to make sure that you're making money. Go make 3, 4, 5 grand in a month. Go make 10 grand in a month. You want to get your spouse on board like that? Go dump $10,000 in the bank account because you had a hot month. And trust me, you do that, all of a sudden your spouse starts to look at you a lot differently. They're like, oh, so this thing does work, right? And then they're usually the ones that say, hey, I supported you right from the very beginning, right? I always supported you, honey. I always supported you. Well, they probably did, right? They probably didn't want you to fail, but they probably wanted you to actually show up and put some bread on the table, right? Put some cheddar in the bank account. And if you can't buy it with cash immediately, guess what? You can rent support with a trip, right? You can rent it with a trip. Go qualify on a company trip to Mexico or to Bora Bora, or, we've been lucky enough in our business. We've traveled every single year with our team over the last 3 years. This year we came back from Scotland. Next year we're going to Costa Rica. The year before we were in Mexico staying in the Vedanta, right? And then there will be Hawaii and trips like Nashville and things like that. So you guys have to understand that it doesn't hurt to qualify for these experiences, because it also gives your spouse something tangible to latch onto and go, okay, there's actually something here. right? Give them something tangible to latch onto. So those are the key ways you can buy support. Other ways you can do it is the big way we always did it with myself and my wife was I made sure that I never pushed my business on my wife. I'll put it to you that way. I got into the business long before I ever met my wife. And I was already in the business. I was already building it. I was already growing it. And so for her, she came in as an outsider, right? She'd never seen this business model before. She'd never been in the industry before. In fact, money and entrepreneurship and things like that, especially the financial side of things, really scared her. And so I made sure that I never pushed my business on my wife. I never forced it on her. I never told her she needed to be involved. I never told her that she needed to be an agent. I never told her that she needed to do anything tangibly within the company. But all I did was I made sure she got in the environment. I made sure that she came to the office and came to a few of our events and met a few of our agents and got around the team. And it allowed her to feel like she was immersed in something. It allowed her to make her feel like she was part of it. And then over time, we started to do events in California and places like that. So I brought her to that, and I would bring her to our company convention, our team convention in Edmonton every year. So she came to that. And so she started to really get the full picture of what we do here, that, the environment, the recognition, the personal development, the growth. And that's what she ultimately fell in love with. Right. And so that I just kind of drip fed her our environment. And over time, she came to the conclusion herself that it was something she wanted to be involved in. So that's the other thing too. If you're in a position where maybe you're not necessarily winning so much and you're not necessarily pulling in that much money right now, well, then one thing you can kind of do to sort of, put a Band-Aid over the problem and really kind of, pull them over to your side and really see what you're doing is just allow them to get into the environment itself. Allow them to see what you're actually doing. Allow them to become a part of it. Because most spouses, for them, they just feel like they're on the outside looking in while you build your thing, and they never really get a chance to feel like they're involved. And that's partly what they want to feel as well, too. Some will, actually most will, some won't, and that's okay. But as long as they're supporting in some tangible fashion, then it makes it way easier. You don't want to come home every day to a spouse who's not in support of what you're doing. You don't want to come home every day to somebody who's cutting at you or knocking you down or critiquing you. Having that emotional, tangible support is a massive, massive, massive deal, because then eventually it turns into, well, now they're prospecting for you. They're generating referrals for you. Or in the case of my wife, she's a massive part of my business, right? She's our base shop coordinator. She has relationships with all my agents. She's doing all that stuff, right? And so she keeps me organized. I'm the people guy. I'm the vision guy. I like to close. I like to run meetings. I like to do all that. But when it comes to keeping the business organized from an operational standpoint, that's all her. And I wouldn't be able to do it without her, right? So that's the second point. Third point is leverage your trainer and your team. I think a lot of times part-timers feel like they have to do everything themselves. Leverage your trainer. There's been times in my career where I've had agents who are still here to this day that are, junior brokers making 70, 80 grand a year. When they first started, they didn't even see 80% of the meetings that got them their associate promotion or that got them some clients or that got them new teammates under their belt. They didn't see it. Right? Because they had a full-time job or they were working or they had commitments or things like that. So understand the fact that you have a support system where you are able to leverage it to actually have your meetings be run for you, have results be run for you, have your team be built for you, have referrals be generated for you, right? That's ultimately what you have your hands on here. You're not in a solo sport. You're not in a lone wolf business environment. You're in a team environment. So leverage the team. And I think oftentimes people are afraid to let go of that control. But trust me, you got people around you that for all intents and purposes have been doing it way longer than you and make way more money than you. So you should probably leverage them. They'll probably be able to have that same level of success for you too. So feel free to leverage it. Leverage that. Because it frees up time for you to do the things that you need to do either on the family side or the job side, or to generate new prospects, new inventory, new market, or just to get through licensing or get skilled, right? And yeah, you do want to get trained and you do want to make sure that you're learning the fundamentals of the business. But truth be told, you guys, if I'm being straight up, the number one rule of business is just make sure you stay in business, which is just you got to make sure you're creating an income and paying your bills. right? And if that means that you're not necessarily on all the meetings, but revenue still being made and income still being generated because you got a strong support system of agents around you that can do that for you, it is a massive difference. Massive difference. When I first got started, I mean, I was part-time for like 2 weeks, 8 minutes, it felt like, but I remember I was at work and my senior partner was running meetings for me. My trainer was running meetings for me, right? I just lined them up. I was like the bird dog, right? And then they would knock them down, right? They would shoot them out of the sky. They close the business, close the deal, do all of it. So you have a support system. Feel free to lean on it. I find oftentimes most agents don't leverage their trainer or their team as much as they should be. And it sets them back quite a bit because they don't have the working hours to really run. On the topic of working hours, that leads into point number 4. Understand your key metrics. Here's the reality. You do not have the advantage of having a lot of time to build a business. And I'll just be straight up. Someone who is full-time, especially if they're a single dude with no kids or single woman with no kids, they have an unfair advantage over you. They have the advantage of time. And time is like a shotgun. I can just shoot it at the wall. And even though some things might not stick, I'm still probably going to hit my target because I'm just able to release more volume. I'm able to do more because I have more time. And so that is an unfair advantage that they have over you if you're a part-timer. Now, there are certain disadvantages and other struggles and obstacles that come with being a part-timer that I'm going to speak to in a different episode, but you don't have that luxury, right? And so I'll speak to this. I remember a year ago or over a year ago, actually, when my wife was pregnant with our third daughter, I became effectively part-time. And the reason why was because she had some very severe health challenges. With our third daughter. By her 4th month of the pregnancy, she was laid off from her job for health reasons. She was on permanent bed rest and she was having seizures every 15 minutes around the clock, just trying to survive. And so, fortunately with our business, I just didn't go to the office, right? I didn't go to the office. I stayed home. I woke up every morning, got our girls ready, took them off to daycare or to school, came home, looked after my wife. And then I hopped into meetings here and there where I could and made money. And, it's great and everything. We still paid our bills. We still made 6 figures effectively part-time. But the thing with that, you guys, is it severely limited my ability to compete from a time perspective, right? I wasn't able to necessarily have a level playing field with guys that were single dudes who had no families, right? And there were guys that I was competing with who were in that boat, right? They were single guys, younger dudes, I don't want to say they didn't have a lot of responsibilities because I don't know their personal picture, but they didn't have necessarily the same responsibilities or the same time sinks that maybe I would have had, being a dad to 3 kids, looking after a sick wife, right? So I can't beat them on the time side. I can't just shotgun shit at a wall and hope I hit them just through volume, which means you have to be a lot more surgical. You have to be a lot more tactical and you have to be a lot more strategic. And so how can we do that? Well, it means we have to understand our key metrics. And what I mean by understanding our key metrics, I mean, you need to understand the numbers of your business. I think a lot of times people get into this industry and they approach it like it's some kind of network marketing or multi-level marketing deal where they're like, I'll just recruit a whole bunch of people and then I'll make money. No, I'll just go sell a whole bunch of business and then I'll make money. No, right? It's a business. And so if you run it like a business, it'll pay you like a business. If you run it like some kind of deal, it's always going to be up and down, up and down, up and down, inconsistent. You're never really going to feel like it's getting off the ground. And so what you have to do is you have to understand, firstly, okay, number 1, I'm in a business, but number 2, now I have to run it like a business. And a business has metrics. A business has numbers. And in our business, we have some metrics. We have some numbers that we can follow. The first is points per recruit, right? Per recruits, per new hires that you bring into your team, into your agency, how much production do you tend to generate from that agent or their market while you're training them? The second thing is, production per license, points per license, right? Per the amount of licensed agents you have on your team, how much production do you typically tend to generate or write? Third thing is net point ratio, or persistency, as some people in the industry call it, which is of the business you write, how much of it actually stays on the books, right? And then finally, the big things you should be taking a look at are how can I increase those volumes, right? There's other metrics in the business, like there's licensing ratio, how many of your agents get licensed, things like that. But to be honest with you guys, those big three are really the ones you need to focus on, in my opinion. You need to know how much am I growing by, how much am I retaining by, and how much business are we writing? So you identify those three, and then you find a way to increase it. You see, the thing with my story where I was competing with guys that were younger than me and had more time than me is I couldn't beat them on time, but I could beat them on metrics. And so what I was able to do is I just ran their numbers. I saw the numbers they were doing. So on average, they were doing about 4,000 points per recruit. They were getting such and such amount of volume, licensing so many people. And so I looked at that number and I was like, okay, now how can I catch up to them? Well, the answer is you double their number, right? You double their number. So if the guy I'm competing with is doing 4,000 points worth of business off just one recruit, then I need to be at 8,000 points, because that means I can do half the work that he does and I can still maintain pace, right? And I'm probably only going to be able to do half the work that he does because I have half the working hours that he does. Is that starting to make sense? So what you do is you start to understand your metrics and you start to increase them and bump them up. That's the only way you can compete with full-timers, by the way. The only way you can compete with full-timers, the main way you can compete with full-timers is you have to have really, really tight numbers. You have to understand your metrics and you have to know how to grow them, right? And the best way to grow them is you have to start getting yourself into a qualified market, and you have to understand the business you're in, the business you're writing, and you have to be able to know how to increase production per licensed agent. And so things have to be tight. They have to be really, really, really tight. When you're full-time, you can afford to be sloppy, right? Because you have so much working time, so many working hours that even if things aren't really running that tight in your business and your metrics are all over the place, you got enough time that you can, again, just shotgun shit at the wall and things will stick, right? But if you don't have working hours, you have to keep it as tight as possible. Your system for starting up new agents has to be tight. Your trainer program has to be tight. Your metrics have to be tight. Because if something in there goes wrong, you don't necessarily have the working hours to correct it as quickly or as easily as someone who's full-time does. But the good thing is once you figure it out, once you get it going, once you get things rocking, then you're set. And then you put yourself in a position where you're actually able to start competing with some of these guys, and boom, we start to have a real business that's building. And the sooner you get to a point where you have a real business that's building, the sooner you actually are getting paid like it's a business. And the sooner you start getting paid like it's a business, well, if it's what you want, you start transitioning full-time and you start building a real freaking business, right? And if you're just here to be part-time for the rest of your life, make $2, $3, $4 a month, that's awesome. Don't let anyone take that away from you. Don't ever let anyone think that is something lesser than being full-time. That being part-time in this industry and helping families while pursuing a career, super noble thing. It's a beautiful thing. But if you're going to do it right and make a ton of money doing it and be consistent with doing it. And then my final point number 5, very simple, is identify yourself as the agent and not as your job. And I see people do this all the time especially when they're part-time. Like, I bring on a new agent. She's part-time, works as a finance director or whatever. Ask her what she does. Guess what her first answer is going to be? Oh, I'm a finance director. It drives me insane. Listen, you are not your job. You are not your job. That job at some point most likely will lay you off, and they will find somebody else to replace you. If you got sick or you went through surgery or you got hurt or you had something happen, that position that you're in, that role you're in can end like that, and it can also change like that. And then all of a sudden you go from I'm a finance director to, oh, now I sell cars. Or you go from, oh, I'm a school teacher at high school to now I'm a social worker, right? Like, the role can always change. You are not your job. So stop identifying yourself by your career. When you're going out there and you're prospecting and you're talking to people and they're like, hey, what do you do? If you answer, oh, I work at so-and-so, or I do such and such, and it's your job role, that doesn't do anything for you. The employer is already paying your bills. They're already paying you your income because you show up and do the job every day. You don't need to convince somebody or tell somebody you work there, because it's not going to have an effect on your income. But what will have an effect on your income with your business is actually letting people know what the heck you do. And if people know what you do, then guess what? Money follows attention. They might become a client. They might start up in your business part-time. They might do business with you in some capacity, but they can't do any of those things if they don't know what you do. And so you need to start identifying yourself with the role you have within the business that you have. So if somebody asks you, hey, what do you do? It's not, oh, I'm a finance director, or I'm a social worker, or I'm a teacher, or I'm a this, or I'm a that. No, it's, hey, I actually work in a financial brokerage, right? We help families, right? We teach them how money works. We get them out of debt. We get them on track financially. That's what I do. That is a way more crystal cut, clear answer than, yeah, I work selling cars, right? So you have to give people the opportunity to actually know what you do. You are a billboard for your business. Your day-to-day life, how you conduct yourself, how you act, how you speak, how you talk, your social media presence, all of it is a billboard for your day-to-day life. And so you need to make sure that you are actually drawing attention with your billboard. If you go talk to a real estate agent who's part-time and you ask that real estate agent what they do, they're not going to say, oh, I work a job outside of this and here's my job. No, they're going to say, I sell homes. I sell homes with EXP, or I sell homes with Real, or I sell homes with Remax, or whatever. They're going to tell you they sell homes, right? If you talk to somebody using car sales, they're going to be like, yeah, I sell cars. So don't be afraid to say, yeah, I work in finance. Yeah, I run a financial brokerage. Yeah, I run a financial team. Yeah, I help people get out of debt and save money. Actually stand by it. Actually stand by it. Because once you start doing that, you start to generate some attention towards your business. And trust me, if you're part-time and you have a small amount of working hours, you're going to need all the attention you can get, because you need to be able to stack as many opportunities for results in that limited window of time that you have. And so that's what you need to be doing. You need to be carrying yourself like you are the spokesperson of your business. You're not just a financial agent. You don't just deal in insurance and investments. You're also a chief marketing officer for your agency. And if you're not marketing, you're not generating any new clientele or any new business. So that's it, you guys. Those are the 5 ways to win part-time. And I mean, really win, like be consistent and making money and paying down debt and paying off those bills and building up some savings. You can do it here. I know guys that make 50, 60, 70, 80 grand a year part-time, working very few hours. But the reason why they do it is because they are very tight with their hours. They're focused, they're disciplined, and they do the things I just said. So appreciate you guys. Hope this helped a lot of you. If you're part-time, it helps you get to a point where you're transitioning from where you are now to where you want to go. So can't wait to see you guys in the next episode. Like I said, I've been your host, Trey Lansdell. This has been a Founders Corner, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.